Other than that, we're going to go ahead and get started. Make sure my room's right. That seems good enough. Yeah, sure. All right. Toki yanare yo. Miyan kekan-san. Miwile pana e sona pitoki pona. Hey everyone, I'm Greg Den3, and today I want to teach you about Toki Pona. Today we're going to be talking about the word la, and while it is complicated, I promise you, it is only complicated insofar as Toki Pona is complicated, so not so much. That's a bit of a joke. Toki Pona does get complicated, but don't worry, the grammar here is not so bad, and I'm going to condense it down to some fairly simple examples to make it more understandable. So, it's not actually going to be just about la. This lesson is also going to be on prepositions because it turns out those two things overlap very, very much. So first, what is the deal with la itself? La looks like this in Citalin Pona, basically a closed parenthesis. It's a little bit more stylized than just that if you want to get fancy about it, but it's basically a closed parenthesis, spelled L-A. And la is a general purpose context marker. What that means is if you put it before some sentence and then some phrase before that, or some other sentence, that phrase or sentence is context for the thing that follows. But that's really, really broad. And that's intentional, because la can be any type of context. It can be where or when or why something occurs. It can be cause and effect. It can be a description of other things in the sentence, and it can fairly frequently even take on the role of other grammatical particles, though it's a little kludgy, and so it's preferred to actually use those grammatical particles. Okay, but how do you actually use it? I said phrases and sentences, but what does it look like in a sentence? Well, let's try something very simple. Tomo ni la sina kute e mi. Tomo ni la sina kute e mi. This is a description of what you're doing right now. Tomo, room, building. Ni, this or that. La, our context marker, so tomo ni is context for this sentence. Sina, you. Kute, to listen, hear. E, mark an object. Mi, myself, I. So altogether, tomo ni, this room. La, some context. Sina kute, you listen. E mi, to me basically, or really, sina kute e mi, you hear me. So basically, in this room, you are listening to me. Here, the context up front is actually very similar to the word lon, or rather, its function as a preposition. So we could similarly say, sina kute e mi lon tomo ni. Sina kute e mi lon tomo ni. Again, basically the same deal. And this is that bit I was talking about where la is very similar to the prepositions. Lon here is acting as a preposition, that is, it's offering some context about the situation itself. It's just a specific kind of context. Lon tells you locations, right? So it could be where something occurs or when something occurs. And this is the basic idea with la phrases. So there's some kind of context, and that type of context is itself contextual, which is a little silly, but it is true. If, for example, I swapped this phrase out for something else, how about, how about palimute la sina kute e mi. Palimute la sina kute e mi. So same sentence, sinakute e mi, you listen to me, but the different context, palimute, conveys a different meaning to that sentence. Where in the previous one, we were talking about a location, tomo ni, so this room. Here, we're talking about some property of this entire action, palimute. So what we're saying here, well, pali is to work or to create, and then mute is a lot or very. It emphasizes the thing, especially when it comes to amount. So, pali mute, a lot of work, la sinakute e mi. Well, that's actually very similar to saying, we'll just tack it onto the end here, kepekin pali mute. Kepekin is another preposition. And what we get here is the same idea. So, with a lot of work, you listen to me. Palimute la sinakute e mi. So, here we get the general idea. La phrases tend to be very similar to prepositions. But, of course, that's not all they can do. This is just a helpful reference for understanding both these things at the same time. If you have a la phrase, there's a very good chance it is functioning the same way as some other preposition. And it's relatively common to do something like, if I want to use two similar prepositions, just put one in la and the other at the end of the sentence in whatever corresponding preposition. We're not going to dig into that example right now, but as like a taste of what is possible. All right, so let me clear that. And let's back up a bit to talk about la more generally. I said that it's a general context particle, but like, if you're totally new to Toki Pona, it can be a little hard to wrap your head around like what word to fill in. Because it's very common in early language learning to go like, okay, what's like the closest thing to this in a language I know, and keep doing that exercise until it's just intuitive and you don't need to think about it anymore. With la, we might say, so let's say we have some phrase up here, particle la, and then some sentence, right? We'll call this one, so one, and two, just to make it easy to mark them. In this case, we might interpret la in English as being like, if one, if the first thing, then the second thing. We could also say, because of one, two happens, or whatever is in two there. Like I said, it could be cause and effect, it could be a description, it could be a lot of different things, but ultimately it really comes down to, excuse me, my notes have disappeared on me. Woo. Okay, sorry. I've got them pulled up in an overlay. The most general form is saying like, in the context of one, two. So like, that first sentence we had, tomo ni la sinakute e mi, in the context of this room, la sinakute e mi, you are listening to me. And while that still has the very general form la does, it's more clear with that translation what is going on. Like in the context of the room, oh, wait a minute, the room is a location, so clearly we're in the room. It's where something is occurring. Right, so that's the general form of la, and you'll find that these English versions, even if you had sentences, would still work. We'll get to that later in the lesson. But now, my job is giving you lots of examples of la with phrases. So, let me clear that. We've seen the equivalent of lon, so there's your locations, but what if you wanted to talk about, like, your feelings? Well, a common way to do that uses la, and we could say, mi, la, nasin, sina, li, pona. Oop, got that in the board a bit. Pona. Let me just clear that really quick. Pona. There we go. Mi, la, nasin sina li pona. So I said this is about perspective, and that's because me up here is expressing something in the context of yourself. So it's like that thing is relative to you, that thing is related to your feelings. Mi la. So to me, in my perspective, nasin sina. Nasin is a method, a way, a literal physical path, a road. Here it's like a means of accomplishing something, like that way of doing things. Mi la nasin sina, so your way of doing things, perhaps. Li pona, so basically is good, is effective. Similar deal if we put like pilin mi. I would say for most purposes, there's not much difference between like mila versus pilin mila and then some sentence. One is just a little bit more general, I suppose. And the other is like clarifying it's about like your feeling as opposed to just your general perspective, your emotions as opposed to your general perspective. Getting in the weeds there though. Sentence as a whole. So in my opinion, your way of doing things, nasin sina, lipona, is good. But I said this is about perspective, and so this is very similar to the preposition tawa. We could also say nasin sina li pona tawa mi. So there you have it. Tawa is a preposition here. So that's like to or for, excuse me. And then tawa mi, to me, like in my perspective, in my opinion. Again, this, oh, I crashed? Okay, I did not crash, excuse me. I just stalled for a moment. Okay, this phrase up here, basically the same as this phrase over here. And you could also say tawa pilin mi as well. Again, this is hammering in that idea that la phrases are very similar to specific prepositions. So, it is worth mentioning, and I did briefly go over this, but it is worth mentioning just to clarify again, the la phrase up here is very general. The preposition is a little more specific. So there's a possible meaning here that is less obvious with the la phrase and maybe more possible with the prepositional phrase. We could be saying mi la nasin sina lipona, that is, in my opinion, your way of doing things is good. We could be saying with tawa instead, nasin sina lipona tawa mi, your way of doing things is helping me, right? Technically, both these meanings are possible. It's always a contextual thing, and I know that keeps being silly with this being the context particle and all, but it's nonetheless true. The thing to know is la phrase, more general, more possible meanings. Preposition phrase, more specific, less possible meanings, but still a lot as it goes. Right, so continuing. Clear that. So, I mentioned before that the la phrase could do things other than pretend to be a preposition, and that is true. One thing it can do is convey a common description among something in the sentence. So we could say, if you've seen one of my lessons before, you've seen this example before. Lasso, la, kasi, li, pilin, pona. And then separately, loye, la, kasi, li, kama, moli. So reading that out, laso la, kasi, li, pilin, pona, loye la, kasi, li, kama, moli. So the first one. Lasso is basically any shade of blue or green. It's one of your color words. La, context particle, of course. Kasi is a plant of any kind. Li indicates the verb. Pilin pona. So a good feeling. Pilin is to experience or feel. Pona is good, so a good feeling. Laso, la, kasi li pilin pona. So in the context of green, plants feel good. Or interpreting that a bit, when plants are green, they're feeling good. And then the second one, loye la kasi li kama moli. Loye is any sort of shade of red. La is, of course, the context particle again. Kasi, plants again. Li, verb. Kama, that's a preverb. It indicates a change of state. Moli, so kama moli is to become dead, to die. Loye la kasi li kama moli. When plants are red, they are dying. So the idea here, especially with the juxtaposition of these two sentences, is that we take some description of the kasi and make an observation based on it. Here, we're using a phrase, and there isn't really a specific preposition that this is most clear, like most similar to. Lon is a little bit similar, but I think that would confuse a fair number of people. It's possible to understand, but here the la phrase really does it best. And this is actually a good segue into sentences within la, because while this is pretty good, this idea of like tacking a description into la works pretty well, we could also, for example, have a sentence. So we could say, here, I'll do this over on the right. Kasi li laso la ona li pilin pona. And I think this becomes clear immediately, but we're going to go over it. Kasi li laso is a full sentence before la. So this full sentence is context for the thing after la, and kasi li laso, plants are green. Well, that's not a super helpful insight on its own, but what makes that understanding clear is the sentence that follows. La, ona, li, pilin, pona. So, ona, third person pronoun, refers back to kasi. So, kasi li laso, la, if plants are green, ona li pilin pona. They feel well, they feel good, they are healthy. And the same goes down here. Although if we're putting these sentences side by side, well, ona li loye la ona li kama moli. Ona li loye la ona li kama moli. Same deal here. Full sentence before la. We've used ona again, that third person pronoun, so some, he, she, it, they. And again, it refers back to kasi, but this time from another sentence. And ona here is doing that as well. So ona li loye la, if they are red, la, ona li kamamoli, they are dying. So this is the exact same idea as these pair of sentences on the left here. That is, we're describing some property of kasi and then using that to express some useful piece of information. But in this case, rather than that be just the description, which really could be a lot more than just this, like in general, putting a single word in la can mean so many different things. But putting a sentence in la, well, all of a sudden, that makes things way more clear. Like, it's a bit of a silly interpretation, but like up front, what if we're marking the plants? What if we're like using paints to mark the plants, like we've drawn on their bark, on the bark of some trees to indicate their well-being, and we've used green to indicate healthy trees, and we've used red to indicate dying trees. Like, that's just as valid interpretation up here. but not so much over here, right? Like that marking interpretation, obviously, again, a context thing, but to get the point across, that marking interpretation doesn't really work over here. Like we could say kasi li laso to mean when the plant is marked in green, but we might instead want to say more like laso li lon kasi. That is, green is on the plant. But we're not doing that. We're describing the plant itself. Kasi li laso. The plant is green. And that's the really nice thing about sentences, in law that is. They make your specificity much more understandable. They allow you to express information in a sentence much more clearly, I should say. So that's the idea with sentences. You can say, you could have a description, but if you convey a complete idea, a complete sentence, you can get across information much more effectively and eliminate a lot of possible confusion. And that really is the important thing when you're learning Toki Pona, is to find that balance between saying enough to get an idea across, but not saying so much that your sentence turns into a mess, right? And that's the importance of all of the grammatical particles. Absolutely all of them, and every little detail along the way. All these different grammatical particles serve to essentially catch the listener's ear and convey some specific piece of information. Like, well, I suppose I'm getting a little outside of the purpose of this lesson, so I'll briefly summarize. Each grammatical particle conveys some idea about the word in it. Like, Pona can mean a different thing if it is inside of li versus when it's inside of a la phrase or inside of e or directly after o, right? You interpret the word differently based on what grammatical particles it is in, what part of speech it is in. That's true of all of the words. And la and full sentences are no different. Short version, grammatical particles, very helpful for understanding. All right, now that I finished my tangent, we're going to keep doing examples. Clear that. Let me fetch another one. Right, so, let's do a more complicated one with a longer sentence in both before and after la, both before and after la. Let's say Yan, Li, Wile, Pona. Oh, that's the worst Pona of all time. Pona, Tawa, Mi, La, Mi, Wile, Pona, Tawa, Ona. So, rereading that. Yan, li wile pona, tawa mi la, mi wile pona, tawa ona. Now, it is helpful that in this particular case, these sentences are very similar to one another, so it's pretty easy to figure out what's going on. But to go over it, Yan is a person, a being of any description. So when people, li wile, want or need, pona, good, positive, pleasant, tawa, a preposition, to or for, mi. So this full sentence, Yan li wile pona tawa mi. Now, if it were not in law, we would read it more like, people want to be good to me. People, Yan, li wile pona, want to be good, tawa mi, to me. But in law, it's now a condition. That is some cause and effect. So, Yan li wile pona tawa mi. When Yan li wile pona, people want to be good, tawa mi, to me, when people want to be good to me, la. Mi wile pona tawa ona. And at this point, we can probably read this, so I'll just read it out. I want to be good to them. This is probably the best case for an understandable sentence, because again, it's two very similar sentences on either end. But when sentences get longer, you really need to pay attention to those grammatical particles to follow along. So what's going on here is we have li, we have tawa, la. Mi is kind of performing the role of li here, so I'll mark that a little differently. And then we have tawa again. Every single one of these points, every single one of these grammatical particles is an opportunity to clarify the sentence in some way. Especially so with la, right? So the full sentence, when people want to be good to me, I want to be good to them. So there you go. All right, let me find one more longer example. Let's see. Ona li alasa e sona kasi lon tenpo suli la ona li kama yo e lipu wawa pi sona ni. All right, from the top. Ona li alasa e sona kasi lon tenpo suli la. Ona li kama yo e lipu wawa pi sona ni. Lots of things going on, but we can break it down. We have the first sentence up front before la. Ona, some unspecified third person. Li alasa. Alasa is to hunt or search or try. Ona li alasa. So they are searching for. Sona kasi. Sona kasi. Sona is knowledge or understanding. Kasi, of course, is plant. Lon here is a preposition. So it's telling us where or when something occurs. Tempo, time, and suli, large or important. So tempo suli, a large amount of time. So first, we have our grammatical particles, li, e, and lon, helping us mark our way through that sentence. Every single one is an opportunity to clarify some piece of information throughout this one sentence, let alone when we get to la. Ona li alasa e sona kasi lon tempo suli. It's also worth mentioning very briefly, whenever I speak these aloud, I pay special attention to de-emphasize the particles a bit, which in turn emphasizes the phrases between them. This is another very effective way to essentially mark somebody's way through the sentence, to guide them through all this information. So the second sentence, la, ona, still they or them, that same one at the start. Li kama yo e lipu wawa pi sona ni. Right, so what does the first sentence mean? Ona li arasa, they are searching. Sona kasi, for plant knowledge. Lon tempo suli, for a long time. La, so all of that is a condition or context for the thing that follows. Ona li kama yo, they receive, they come to possess. E lipuwawa, powerful document, an amazing document. Pi sona ni. Pi sona ni, all one thing, of this knowledge. This knowledge is referring back to sonakasi. So they have been searching for plant knowledge for a long time. Now I've intuited the past tense here because the main sentence is describing what is essentially a current event. Remember how I said kama is a change of state? That's something that's occurring or is ongoing or has occurred, right? Onali kama yo, they receive e lipuawa, a powerful document, pi sonani, this knowledge. What I'm getting at with this larger phrase here, it could be explained in more detail with another sentence, but lipuawa pi sonani, this in context with we know they've been searching for plant knowledge for a long time, that must be like a degree, right? In other words, this person is very skilled in plant biology, or really anything to that effect. We can always be more specific with more sentences. The length of the lesson does limit me there. But altogether, ona li alasa e sonakasi, they have been searching for plant knowledge, lon temposuli, for a long time. La is so there, basically. Ona li kamayo, they receive, e lipuwawa pi sonani, a document indicating their incredible knowledge of the subject. That's a mouthful. But I do hope by this point these parts of the sentence are understandable. All right, I've run up against time here, but fortunately I got through all of the topics I wanted to cover. So if you want to very quickly ask any questions, now is the time. Yep. Mm-hmm. That's kind of a complicated question. And the reason it's complicated is because there's kind of a divide between what is the ideal way to speak Toki Pona versus what is the way people like tend to based on their own experience with language. Like the way that Toki Pona, the language of good, prescribes is the word o, like if you say o ni, like do this, that should be polite enough, right? But it is also true that people often soften their statements in Toki Pona. So like if they say, if they want to say, sina wilela o ni, like if you want to do this, just to soften it, like people do that, right? There's no like one correct answer. I would say just do what you're comfortable with. Any more questions? Yeah. No more questions? Cool. Well, then that's it. Thank you all so much. Oh, wait. Was there one more question? I'm so sorry. Yes, absolutely. I won't be able to like come up with an example on the spot, but if there are like two things that are a condition for something that occurs, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you can totally use law more than one time. It is recommended to avoid doing it more than once. I think sentences like law with two full sentences before it is fairly, or sorry, a sentence with two full law phrases, law sentences is fairly rare, but people do it. I think most commonly is like some condition and then like a single word phrase. So like ken la in the middle and then the sentence. It's like if this thing, then maybe this other thing, right? But yeah, you can use law more than once. All right. If there are not any more questions, we're going to head to the next section. Thank you all so much for listening.